So as long as we don't talk for 4 hours, we're all good.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. So, hello.
Yes.
Welcome to Read Red. Today I have old friend of the channel, Callum, back, and we are talking about William Shakespeare. Specifically, the title of this video is, so I've gotten into a thing recently where I'm using like clickbait titles
Good.
for videos because, you know, as long as the content is still good, then I think it doesn't matter as long as I get the people in. And based on an anecdote you told me, this video is called Herman Melville is an idiot and so am I. And it's based off a letter that Melville told to his to a friend, where Melville wrote, quote, "Dolt and ass that I am, I have lived more than 29 years and, until a few days ago, never made close acquaintance with the divine William Shakespeare." And then he goes on to talk about why, but none of that matters because for the sake of the thumbnail. But the reason that I am also an idiot is because I am nearing the end of my 20s and are you 30 yet, or are you?
I am.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
the big 3-0.
Yeah, woo. And so both of us have experienced this similar kind of going a while without really getting into Shakespeare. And so this video, we are going to talk about King Lear, but we're going to also just talk about how we got into Shakespeare and what we still want to read and experiences. Was there a degree of hype that Shakespeare had that like lived up to or didn't live up to? And for me, like the whole point is that it like really lived up to the hype. Almost in a way that literally does make me feel like, yeah, I'm a bit of an idiot. But how did you first start reading Shakespeare, Callum?
Well, I had to read him in high school, so we would have done Merchant of Venice is the one I remember studying. And it's funny, I recently taught it to a group of kids who were the same age I was when I first read it. And I was like, man, I can see why I remember this, because there is some extremely exciting content in that one. I was actually curious, so in Canberra, I think it's mandatory to study at like years 7 to 10 across Australia at some point. But in our years 11 and 12, the years just before uni, we could get away with not studying Shakespeare. You could do other English courses. Whereas the New South Wales system, now I work as an English tutor here, it's mandatory to do it for your English classes, which are mandatory to like get your ATAR and enter into university. So I've noticed since moving here that kids are way more, like they've just read more Shakespeare. The whole system is more oriented around Shakespeare. So I was actually curious how you managed to avoid him in high school.
So I believe I read Othello in high school and watched the film of Romeo and Juliet along with like extracts with obviously Shakespeare, but I don't remember doing Shakespeare in year 11 and 12.
Interesting.
Yeah, it would have been like Othello and Romeo and Juliet definitely would have been.
And then it was just spark notes for all of
Yeah, honestly, it was like maybe, I vaguely remember we had to read The Book Thief, but I definitely didn't read it.
That's very funny.
I remember a friend of mine stole The Book Thief from school.
Good.
So, yeah, and I don't think he's ever read it. But,
to your original question, so I kind of had those initial interactions, wasn't super gripped, and then obviously, you know, kind of getting back and more into reading as I kind of wrap up my early stages of university. You hear a lot about Shakespeare, but it like be kind of, I don't know, it's just like, on what day do you say to yourself, I'm going to go out and like buy Romeo and Juliet and read it? Like, it's just kind of a strange decision to be like, today's the day. I really feel like really reading a play. Like, you know, if it's not in your life. But I actually saw a uni course on Shakespeare, and obviously everyone, as you say, is like very hyped. So it's like, maybe this would be a good opportunity to like force myself to eat my vegetables.
Yeah.
So I did the course, and it was kind of like, I'd say maybe like the A- tier of Shakespeare plays was like the focus of it, like Antony and Cleopatra and The Tempest and stuff. And I really loved a lot of those, and I was kind of remember being amazed, maybe like just surprised by how like silly he was. That was what really stood out to me. And then following that, I think a lot of the exposure more recently has been reading him again to prepare, like helping students study him, which actually has been a really helpful mode of kind of interaction, because maybe the way I'd put it is like when you have like assessment on the line, it's kind of in a weird way hard to deeply engage with the text because you're so focused on what's going to help you with the assessment.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas when you're on the other side of the equation in a kind of teaching role, you have this kind of moral sense that you ought to like deeply understand the text in some way that like
based on however the students want to write about it, right? Like
I think maybe
just to have the options, so if they say they want to write about A, you already know about A and blah blah blah.
I almost think it's like I feel like I'm in more of like a salesperson role for Shakespeare there, because obviously they're doing English tutoring because their parents make them by and large, and then they have to do Shakespeare, which is annoying. They would rather do The Book Thief by and large because he's like a bit hard. So I found the way I was often doing it was like really emphasizing the reading aloud aspect, and then they don't, like me, they don't naturally just know what a lot of the words mean or what a lot of the references are. So if I'm kind of like translating it for them live and being like, oh, here he's actually just making like a dick joke. Like, no, I wouldn't use that language. But
a phallic implication.
Exactly. Clarifying the issue immensely for them. Yeah. But just kind of noting like, oh, here Shakespeare is like being immature. Like he's making a joke you would make. Yeah. But in fancy language. So I guess what I mean by like deeply understand it is just actually making an effort to grasp on a line by line basis what's going on in the play through the whole play, whereas I think when you're kind of doing it more directed toward assessment, maybe you like read it once but then you just kind of try to select different passages and kind of the forest can get a little lost. What about you, Nick?
So for me, also similarly, I couldn't quote anything from Othello, so I'm essentially just going to negate all of the stuff that I did before I got back into reading in my mid-20s. And probably the first thing that I read of Shakespeare was I just went through his sonnets, because that was, like, I was hearing about them. I suppose I was inspired by like them showing up in Stoner by Williams, and particularly like I like that book just chronicles the process of falling in love with literature, specifically through Shakespeare's sonnets, but it seemed like the logical short thing to read to get into the world of Shakespeare and to start, like, I was in this weird position where I was reading poets that wrote in free verse and I kind of liked them, but I knew that there was something that was lacking, and I was just thought, okay, who's the guy that did poetry in a form and just kept doing it and it kept being great? So I was like, all right, you know what, let's go for our iambic pentameter sonnet, and went through and read Shakespeare, and even though I've been a bit naughty and I've not gone around to actually do this, I really just got the impression that I wanted to memorize some of them. I think Shakespeare was really the one, and through his sonnets, that made me more interested in poetry that was written in a form and with like metric structure and so on. From there, I think I read, again, just this wild coincidence, I read Hamlet 2 days before I read Infinite Jest, and I didn't realize that was where Wallace got the title. So I'm just reading, and it was this great, like, yes, now is the right time to read Infinite Jest, because I read the scene with poor Yorick, and just kind of, again, fell completely in love with it and in love with the writing. And I experienced probably the first feeling that also happens in King Lear a lot, which is this leaning forward. It's like when you sit up in your chair and you just think, oh wait, no, this is actually really, really good, and I really need to be paying attention to this.
Was there something about like the way in which it was good that took you by surprise?
I think there was something there Maybe the feeling that I have is when you're reading prose and it's prose that you can kind of understand, if the story or the plot is quite complex, then you're understanding the words, but you still need to exercise your brain a little bit to be focusing on the complexity of the plot and to try and put things together. Like, I would say if you read something by Pynchon, that's kind of the idea where actually the language isn't so hard to understand. You probably don't need a dictionary for every page, but the plot moves so quickly and is so complex that you're a little bit like, oh fuck, who was that again? Like what is really happening?
I thought you were going to say like John le Carré or like some spy or something.
Yeah,
Pynchon's a pretty funny example there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know,
famously readable prose.
Yeah. Well, no, but I just feel like the thing with something like Lot 49 is it's just like, yeah, you understand it, but it's almost like how has he just like digested this scene so quickly and moved on? But the reverse kind of happens with poetry, where it feels like the needing to be thinking forward and thinking ahead is just actually in digesting what's literally happening in each moment, where sometimes the subject or the plot of the poem is very simple. Guy is just talking about a bird, or Guy is talking about woman that he loves, but you're like, for me it's this tension of like feeling like my mind is sort of trying to catch up with the information on the page. And when I'm reading Shakespeare, I think it was this idea of, oh yeah, my mind is catching up with what's on the page because the poetry of what he's writing is complex. But then plot things will happen and you will realize, oh no, I really need to be paying attention to the plot as well. And so there's just this double wave of, oh god, he's really ahead of where I'm at. And for me, it was sort of the moment where, like, you have the first scene, or like Act 1, Scene 1 of Lear and his 3 daughters coming in, and there is the interesting, like, you know, what's the name of the first 2 daughters? Goneril and Regan. And they're like kind of like, what's the word, like obsequious, like being obsequious to him. And then Cordelia comes in and has this sort of like blunt, like, yeah, I like you, but I don't love you, and I'm not going to lie to you, and it like messes with Lear. And for that, like, plot wise, I was kind of following it, and you know, no problem. But then we get to Act 1, Scene 2, and we have Edmund, who, it was the moment where he, after, who's the one that talks to Edmund? Is it Kent? He's talking to him in the room.
Yeah, I think he's initially talking to Kent, and then his dad comes in.
Yeah.
Upper Gloucester.
So, yeah, Gloucester.
Oh, no.
No.
Thanks for the early correction.
No. It is Gloucester. So I was just laughing because I definitely
sold me off the river.
I read it as like Gloucester the whole time, and then I like looked it up. So the second time, thankfully, Gloucester. But yeah, it was that turn of when Edgar comes in and is talking to Edmund, and Edmund has immediately switched, and I was just like really wowed by how complex the plot was in such a dense period, while still trying to untangle the poetry of what he's saying.
Yeah. Now, did you know before you read King Lear the plot?
No, I went in completely blind.
Yeah. Did you figure it out on the first go through?
Ooh, what was the plot again? No. So, but what am I figuring out?
Well, I guess I'm just asking, like, how well you felt like you were following as it went on.
I would say that the thing, definitely for the first read, and probably got a bit better for the second read. I had no idea about like political stuff that was going on. Like I was definitely forgetting who, like, Duke of France, like whatever. I was really focusing in, and like all of the scenes with Lear and the Fool, that was like no problem. Probably even on the first read, but yeah, probably even now, like if somebody asked me like what happened in terms of like political actions in King Lear, I might have to defer to you to give us a plot summary.
Well, I thought it was funny because I actually really struggled with it the first go round. It's kind of interesting, like, which Shakespeare plays that happens with. Like, some of them, like, I remember Hamlet, you can kind of track it pretty easy because it's mostly just Hamlet. And then other ones like Antony and Cleopatra, there's like just a million characters. Like, and you're like, oh my god. It's like, you know how when you're reading like a Russian novel like Dostoevsky, you know, there's like the brothers Karamazov and they like all start with K and you're like, oh my god. But after 100 pages, you've like kind of figured it out. But Shakespeare, like, it's over.
Yeah.
By the time you figured out who's who, like, you've turned the last page and it's like, wow. Anyway, but I just thought it was funny because I was actually like, you know, so obviously like the character of Edmund is playing both sides off against each other. He's the bastard son of Gloucester, and, you know, at the start of the play, Gloucester's kind of like got him as like a bit of a sidekick, and he essentially frames his brother Edgar as having betrayed his father and uses that as leverage to usurp his role as kind of the preferred son, and then he plays a similar trick on his father, kind of framing Gloucester as having betrayed either King Lear or the others, and essentially partakes in usurping that role as well. And then he also double plays the sisters off against each other. Yeah. So that's all going on. And then simultaneously, I mean, it's interesting, there's so much disguise, which is commonly a trope of his comedies going on in this tragedy. I didn't think of that myself. I just read it in the introduction and said it because I thought it would make me sound like I knew what I was talking about.
I have this whole bit in my how to make booktube videos where I just say, like, just read the introduction and say that on camera. So
occasionally verbalize a thought from it. Thank you, Louise Potter. Okay, and then Kent is also, he gets in a fit of rage from Lear. He kind of sends Kent out of the room because Kent, his up to that point second in command, has had the temerity to stand up to him, you know, for the kind of Lear's ludicrous attempt to get his daughters apportion land based on how much his daughters verbalize their love for him. So essentially you've got two people, and then Kent comes back to the king in disguise. He's working for him in disguise. Now, putting all of this together, you've got two characters who are in disguise. Kent kind of literally in disguise working for the king, and Edmund more figuratively disguising his intents and who he's working for. And my first read through of the play, like, Edmund, he had me completely fooled. I was like, he's like a good guy, isn't he? And Kent, meanwhile, I was like, he's clearly deliberately undermining the king in his version of disguise here. But in fact, you know, we come to discover it's the reverse. Like, Edmund's like this kind of the worst.
to quote Jono, a bastard in all senses of the words.
Excellent. But it was funny.
I was definitely, even if I kind of sensed the betrayal, I really sympathized with Edmund the first time, because I think that his like delivery speech of, you know, like what really makes me a bastard is just my circumstance, it's not my character. And so I'm just like, yeah, you know, you are the underdog, you can go and do good, but then as like the play goes on, I'm like, wait, no, but maybe there is some essential bastardness to you.
I was just too confused to even sympathise. But the funny thing was, and I'd be super interested to hear your experience of this. So my first go through, I just had no idea. I think I maybe skate through books a bit more than you. I wouldn't say I skim, but if I'm not understanding stuff, I'm very like, whatever, turn the page. I'll read it again later. If kind of some sense of joy is there, and I know I'll get it on the second go through, so I'm happy to just kind of turn over. But then the second go through, it really clicked for me, and I was like, oh, these guys are these guys, this is kind of the set of alliances here, and that was when I really started to appreciate the language on the page and the jokes and kind of just the overarching structure. Like Edmund, you're like, wow, he actually, like, the level of skill with which he's being the worst person on earth is like pretty impressive.
He is the very best worst person. But how
did you find the kind of reread experience, and what did it reveal?
So definitely for the reread, I enjoyed it the first time, had no idea about like plot and what was happening. Doing the reread, I fell again more in love with just precise lines that were showing up, but also I was and maybe this just aligns with what I'm interested in getting out of Shakespeare, but just this consistent aesthetic sense, or like his ability to just create these images. So especially in scenes like during the storm sequence, and later on where I can't remember who it is, but I know there's Lear the Fool, I think Edgar is there, and maybe Gloucester as well. But there's just this idea of everyone sitting around the campfire and no one knows who everyone else is. So there's this really eerie like blindness that's going on, and obviously blindness is a core theme in Lear. But so much of that, I think I became more interested in the images that I was still sensing the first time, but I would just be honest, like in terms of getting the plot, like I pretty much need to look up the Wikipedia afterwards just to know like what the hell is going on.
That's funny.
But yeah, like just for all the background stuff, which maybe, and I'll ask as well, have you watched Shakespeare plays?
Only
either
in
on
a
like
high
YouTube
school
or,
context. Yeah. But just to the kind of return to the plot and reread thing. Yeah, it's amazing what you notice the second time. And I feel like, so my first go through, you know, you're kind of walking around reading King Lear and you're saying, people are like, what are you reading? You're like, I'm reading King Lear. And sometimes you get the reaction like, you know, come on man, what are you trying to prove? Like,
perform
reading King Lear like for fun. No, I'm doing it for a book tube. But I was kind of like, because I'd never seen it before, my response was almost like, no, I'm doing it for the plot. Like I just want to know. I want to know the story. You know, I'm no fancy schmancy Shakespeare guy. In fact, it's because of my lack of knowledge. And then, you know, but the first go through, you kind of at the end feel like you maybe at least have a outline of the world that you're in and the plot. And I found it was the second one that I started to enjoy those individual lines, because I was no longer like interrogating them for like what on earth was going on. I could kind of be like, oh, appreciate it for what it was, which kind of goes to what you were saying about like, it's the way in which Shakespeare is ahead of you in plot and language at the same time that is a very unique reading experience, because it kind of like gives you these different angles to experience the text across time.
As a reader and also as a writer, is there something that you think reading more Shakespeare like you get out of, instead of just the intrinsic joy of, or instead of just enjoying the thing for itself? Because one quick anecdote I'll chuck in is that after reading Lear and, you know, A Midsummer Night's Dream, I went back to start to do a reread of Paradise Lost, and I remember Paradise Lost just being unfathomably difficult the first time. And on this reread, it's been some time since I read it, like probably like more than a year. I'm just sailing through it. I am like, dude, this is amazing. I'm like following everything, and I think that Shakespeare has really helped develop this muscle of just like focusing on like complicated, longer narrative-driven poetry that is almost kind of the way that I would be if I were to be a Shakespeare salesman. Then I would just say like, look, if you can get this, it's going to unlock a lot more English poetry for you that you maybe thought was inaccessible. And also it's so easy to learn about Shakespeare because everyone's talked about him. So did you have anything similar for Shakespeare?
Well, firstly, I think you should become a professional Shakespeare salesman.
The Merchant of Willie.
The Merchant of Willie. Oh man, you've got some good titles for this.
Yeah, man.
Ready to go. What do I get out of it other than intrinsic joy? In terms of writing, I think a lot of the time when you read the canonical, you know, the kind of classical Bloom canon authors, what I find I get out of them that is like useful or feels useful for my own writing is actually like their flaws. And maybe I'll ask you a quick question. Are there any lines that like spring to mind to you from Lear, or like...
So I have some highlighted, but I almost want to not look at it because I feel like you're asking me.
Yeah.
Can you keep going and let me think about it?
Well, I can tell you mine. I can only remember one.
Yeah.
And it's very short. But out vile jelly.
Yes.
When they poke out Gloucester's eyes. Which, by the way, was an absolutely horrifying scene.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
I remember thinking that like some of the deaths in Hamlet were a little bit like funny and goofy.
Yeah.
And then this one was just like, oh,
that's fun. Let's bracket that for a
yeah, that's a couple.
We should have a chat about the tragic element of this play.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, it's actually such a silly line.
Yeah.
Jelly. Now, I know aeroplane jelly wasn't invented when Shakespeare was writing this, but I'm sure it was not a substance that was taken with the utmost seriousness.
Yeah.
So it's funny to have this like tragic blinding going on, and you just like, what was Shakespeare's expression when he wrote that line?
Yeah.
You know,
was he just giggling or like?
Well, definitely. So I think there's something about like, you know, you see a willingness in Shakespeare to like let go in some sense, and obviously the texts are kind of in a way very tight in the sense that the plots move with a lot of rapidity and information is communicated in quite a dense way, but I feel like it's when you like see an author's written a line and you're like, if I'd written that, I probably would have deleted it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I would have thought it was like too much, and the fact that, you know, they're kind of willing to just like go for it and have been forgiven and even lauded for that quality, I think is very, and I feel like Melville like is kind of a similar sense.
Definitely. You had a similar, so now we're a little bit past our experience of having read Solenoid, but that was a compliment that you gave to Couch Rescue as well, is that ability to kind of take risks within the form, and they actually are the good things, right? But you kind of don't know that, or when you see Shakespeare do something charming or like prose-wise where you know he's not taking it seriously, but he seriously takes it not seriously. Maybe this gets a little bit too into the writing process, but do you think that that's something that can be studied?
Can be studied in what sense?
Well, do you think that you can look at it and just say, like, this is how you can, like, these are places where you can take a risk? Or do you think it is purely a taste thing? Or a feeling thing?
Well, I feel like in a way to kind of, like, look at it analytically and be like, what's the appropriate place to take a literary risk is almost to risk kind of missing the point.
Yeah. Cool.
Because if you knew it was like the right amount of risk, you know, maybe in a sense you should be doing even more than that, right? Because that's kind of like, I feel like that's the temptation, like now with one's own work, is to kind of really think long and hard about that line and be like, I think it's gonna have a phone full out. But, you know, I feel like what I get out of, I mean, especially seeing the way that Shakespeare does it, is you just, I feel like you kind of, what you would want to develop, and maybe the practice element of it is like just a willingness to say yes to something, and to kind of have something that you're a little bit on the fence about, and instead of, you know, having like a million creative writing teachers whispering, kill your darlings. Like in your skull at once think, yeah, but Shakespeare wrote about vile jelly. So maybe I should just keep them in there. And, you know, you can always take them away later. And I think, just as an aside, to steal from another secondary source, the much recommended Emma Smith Oxbridge lectures about Shakespeare. This is an interesting text because we've both got the folio edition, which is substantively different to the quarto edition, and my understanding is that critics think that the folio edition represents a later version of the text by Shakespeare that he had like edited. And, you know, it's useful to kind of be reminded that I'm kind of framing the process that, like, you know, I'm kind of creating this image of him as just being like, aha, and like thoughtlessly doing it. But I think it's clear that he did like deeply edit his work. It's just that, like, even in the editing process, you can kind of be bold
Yeah.
with your own decisions and your willingness to accept what you keep in.
The folio text apparently has about 300 lines cut from the quarto.
How many of them were funny?
Yeah, probably too many. The fool implicitly calls his master a fool. Kent's account of the French invasion. The entire scene in which a gentleman tells Kent of Cordelia's grief on hearing of her father's condition has been cut. How does that make... I was about to say, how does that make you feel? But, so obviously Shakespeare wrote it, performed it, and is editing it as it goes along. Is that a skill? Because presumably, like, we write... The things that we write are stories that we... Sure, like they're done, and like now it's time to publish them. Is there any way of kind of accomplishing that or using that ability to edit any medium other than a play?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the idea of a finished work is more an artifact of the economics of the publishing industry than like a necessary feature of an artistic project.
Yeah.
I mean, Shakespeare is so interesting to think about in this regard, because obviously a lot of the stuff that he was writing were plots that he had taken often extremely closely from prior sources, and there were many kind of King Lear texts prior to the one that we have. I think there's one, is that alternate spelling? Leir? Allegedly a lot of those texts were more light than this King Lear. So often at the end of those texts, Lear emerges triumphant and comes back to the throne. So
I know as a quick anecdote that people were so distraught by the tragic elements of Lear that they performed Shakespeare's version with a happy ending.
Right, yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was going to go on to say, is like with Shakespeare, it's not just like, obviously he changed his works, but also the nature of them being plays means they're constantly subject to being recreated on the stage, and like, that you can't do a play without like adapting in some sense. And I think, just as an aside, like it's kind of another Emma Smith point, but even the kind of critical project that like we're doing now, discussing Lear is like a method of like recreating that play by kind of placing the interpretations we have above the text, even if we're not literally moving the words around on the page. It's kind of like has some sort of influence, at least on how you and I perceive it. But I guess, like, to your point about like what that means for our writing, you could, if you wanted to, like self-publish and like substantially change a work of fiction through editions, and that's like not common. My sense is that it's not common because publishers just like having a final version of the text to sell, but I think it would be a wonderful project to
project.
Just like, if you ever had like just a ludicrous amount of leverage as an author, just go to your publishing house and be like, I'm sorry, I'm actually just going to update this as if it were an economics textbook, like every year, like new jokes, new cultural references.
Well, but the thing is, that's kind of Leaves of Grass.
Right, okay.
That's sort of what Whitman did, because he so like changed it over time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get like, you'll buy editions that are like, the first time he wrote Leaves of Grass was with this like tiny amount of poems, but often if you buy them, it will be the way that those poems were written in the final versions of them. So someone's done it, which is amazing, actually. And apparently there's just like substantial rewrites to lots of his things. I don't know how much he changed Song of Myself. I'll leave it up to viewers to correct me, but Whitman's done it, I think. So that's nice to know.
I feel like something I was thinking about recently is like, on the kind of sales or like writing, like pedagogy side, there's such a narrative of like, you've got to be so careful about like every word, like, everything alters the meaning of the text, which is like, probably strictly speaking true. But kind of sometimes the subtext is like, if you don't have it reach like its perfect form, which is seemingly some like pre-existing substructure beneath the like horrible like words that you put on top of it. If you can only chisel away for long enough, you'll arrive at it. That's kind of like, I feel like the subtext of a lot of creative writing discussion. But it's interesting, then you've got someone like Shakespeare where like one would think he is an example of that. But then we see A, in his own revisions of the quarto, you know, the work was successful in its time, in both its forms, and also is very popular in translation as well. And translation not just between languages, but translation onto the stage, which kind of makes you think like, maybe you could just like have different sets of words, and like there's not kind of, it's not approaching a final form. Like you actually could just have that comma in the wrong place and it would be great. I think that's something funny about, like, you obviously don't want to like totally throw the baby out with the bathwater and be like, oh, the original text, like, who cares? But I think there's something cool about being willing to engage in the other living appendages of a text. You know, like, obviously there is in some sense a version of Paradise Lost, or in some sense a version of like King Lear, that we kind of do want to have the imprimatur of like being the, like, maybe the reference text for everything else, so that we can kind of have a conversation surrounding that. But I think there's something really nice about being also willing to say like, hey, you know, maybe the No Fear Shakespeare is actually like worth reading on its own terms as a text, and kind of is bringing something interesting to the table beyond just like merely being a reduction for pedagogical purposes. Should we talk about the play itself?
Yeah, well, I was almost thinking like, do we need to? But what do you want to talk about with the play?
What did you think of the ending?
The full on tragedy of the ending.
Well,
like,
is it a full on tragedy?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Tell me what happened.
I really hope there's at least one person watching this video who at this point has not Wikipedia'd the plot of King Lear and is really excited for the moment where we tell them what happens. But so, you know, the arc of the play broadly is that Lear, after giving up his power to his daughters and his lands, kind of they gradually turn against him as a result of his general demeanour, one might say. It's kind of interesting, the reason that they turn against him. But he becomes very angry at them as they kind of refuse to give him sort of various things that he wants, like a lot of knights to follow him around, and they get increasingly furious at him. The relationship breaks down, and they essentially try to get rid of King Lear. King Lear, in the kind of final scene, ends up with his third daughter, Cordelia, who is the one who refused to verbalise her love, and as a result received none of King Lear's lands, but ultimately shows herself to be the one who actually loves and respects her father internally. And she has, by this point, kind of married the King of France. King of France and Cordelia and Lear are all together. They end up in a battle against the other two daughters who have kind of betrayed his love, or maybe betrayed their filial duties, would be another way of putting it. And just as an aside, I thought this was very funny. They lose the battle, but there's like no explanation of how or why or what circumstances. I was kind of like, what's going on with the King of France? Like, who's he brought over here? Like, why do they lose? I don't know. Okay. Okay, but Lear loses the battle, and at the end, Edmund has Cordelia killed and is going to have Lear killed when he kind of like is finally unearthed as like this like bit of a worm by the brother he framed.
Edgar comes back.
Earlier. Edgar comes back, challenges Edmund to a duel, kills Edmund. Edmund's like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have like had all these people assassinated, but it's too late. Cordelia's been hung. Lear enters with Cordelia's dead body in his arms. It's actually so ridiculous it's hard to explain, which is kind of funny for the conversation we're about to have. Meanwhile, the two sisters, who are both in love with Edmund and are kind of fighting over him, have like, which one poisons the other one? I think Regan poisons Goneril, and then kills herself also with poison.
Yeah, I knew that there was like a double poison that went on in both of them. And because Edmund has this great line of like, he was flirting with both of them and then he's joined all three of them in death.
Yeah, that's cute.
But
death threesome.
Yeah.
So, you know, at the end of the play, Edmund's dead, Regan, the daughter, is dead, Cordelia, the daughter, is dead, Goneril, the daughter, is dead, Lear kind of dies from some sort of griefy business almost instantaneously. And did Gloucester die?
I don't think so.
No, Gloucester's alive? What happens to Gloucester?
Yeah, wait.
He's not even in this fight.
Because there's like Exit Edgar guiding Gloucester.
Oh, okay, maybe he's chill.
Yeah.
That's nice. He's just blind.
Yeah, he just lost his jellies.
Yeah.
So...
Vile jellies, though.
Yeah.
Would you describe your jellies as vile?
I there are some times where I think when I get like some hay fever, I'm like there's some vile jelly. Yeah.
Sorry, that's disgusting.
That's a post end credit scene. Comment that I'll definitely keep in.
Okay, so at the ending, everyone's dead basically.
Yeah.
The three daughters, Lear and Edmund, are dead. Now, crucially, Cordelia, who's the good daughter, is dead.
Mm.
She's like purely a good character. What did you think of that? Did you think that was purely tragic?
Yeah, I was surprised that Cordelia died, actually. Like, I don't know, because sometimes when you read it, it's like, oh yeah, tragedy is like things are just sad for the sake of being sad, sometimes. Yeah. But does Cordelia's dying align with real historical events? Is that why it happened?
Well, in previous editions of the play, my understanding is, in some previous editions, I think kind of the editions that people would have been familiar with at the time that Shakespeare's came out, she wins the battle with the King of France. Gotcha. And Lear's returned to the throne, and then she inherits it afterwards. So there's a line, apparently, I'm stealing all of this from the Emma Smith Oxford lecture, very good, where Kent says, "Is this the ending we were promised?" or words to that effect. Not to alter Shakespeare's text. Live on camera, caught in the act.
Revisionist.
And that's potentially a reference to the fact that Shakespeare's ending is different to the previous editions of the text. So it would have been, I think, very surprising to the audience when it was first performed, how it ends as well.
At least on the first read, because again, I had no idea, I did feel like there was a little bit of a death avalanche.
That's funny. So it's actually very interesting because the deaths are not as foreshadowed as in other Shakespearean tragedies like Romeo and Juliet, right? There's no star-crossed lovers equivalent at the start of this play.
Yeah.
So it comes as a surprise. And, again, disguise, feature of comedy, surprise, also a feature of comedy. Usually, to like do a bad job of talking about Aristotle. I feel like Aristotelian tragedy kind of involves having the sense that it's going to happen in advance, and then it does happen, and it's even worse, precisely because you know it. But Lear, that only exists on secondary readings of the play. So you've read it twice. The first time you didn't buy the death. Yeah. The second time you did. Now, which reading do you think is, I
don't think I like the ending as much as I liked the ending of Hamlet. But then I don't know if I'm just like projecting, like hopeful desires for a good ending, or just for like justice to be served.
Right. Well, it's kind of interesting, even this idea of like a death as being justified, and that being like a good feature of the text if the characters kind of receive some sort of justice at the end. And there's a huge tangent. There's a very funny Roger Ebert review of Blue Velvet, which is like a 1-star review. Yeah. And his reason is like David Lynch, like, is just putting these women through all this torture, and like they actually don't deserve it, and that's actually like morally problematic. Yeah. That ruins the film. But I think some people have a very similar perception of King Lear, that Cordelia's death is just like completely unjust, and that's actually a problem for the play. There's kind of all these amazing scenes in the lead up to the conclusion, both in terms of, the language, like Lear is very good at insulting people, just as one example. But then the end is kind of like a little thorny, even the emotive sense it's meant to give us. I thought it was funny.
Funny? Funny?
Not just funny, but I was kind of laughing.
Yeah. Gotcha.
You know what? But it wasn't Cordelia. It was actually Goneril and Regan. It was just struck me as a bit farcical because there's all the characters you care about. I mean, Edmund has this kind of charm of his own because he's so like skillful. He's kind of a classic anti-hero in a way, maybe. I don't know if he's a classic anti-hero. Yeah. He's, okay, whatever.
An antique.
He's something.
Yeah.
And you know, Lear's got his own thing going on. You kind of feel for him in a sense because he gets a lot of lines at least. And then Cordelia, you know, definitely you're like, oh. Yeah. But then the two sisters,
they have a very farcical death.
They come across as quite evil throughout the play. Now, you might subtextually wonder what their relationship with Lear was like as children, for them to hate him so much, and find a method to empathise with them in that way. Or if you've had experience like caring for crotchety elder people in a, you know, in the kind of power dynamics there, maybe you also. But the actual lines, okay, and then at the end, they just like murder each other over Edmund, and you're like, how good looking is this guy? Like, it's like, it just seems so outside of the rest of the text. Like they could have just gone to prison or something, but then they die, and it's like, it's kind of like, you don't, well, it doesn't seem like a tragedy that they die, but nor does it even seem like just like, it just seems like weird, like a high school like love triangle has got a little bit out of hand. And then, but it's like juxtaposed with Cordelia and Lear, so you're kind of like, there's these characters you really care about dying, and then there's these other two like right next to them. You're like, what? What movie are we in? Have you ever read The Spanish Tragedy?
No, is that Kid?
Yes.
No,
it's Kid. No. So we read it in the Shakespeare course I did, and it's like pre-Shakespeare. But it's kind of interesting because it's like titled The Spanish Tragedy, and at the end all the characters die. But it's like super fast. It's like there's so much blood. Yeah. It's like ridiculous, kind of like in a way that would be very familiar from kind of contemporary versions of that, where it's kind of like cartoonish. It's maybe the way you put it. So it's interesting, like an ending like Lee. You're kind of like, is this a little bit like in that area? Yeah. In some sense. Yeah. I guess I have like kind of maybe like a final thought here about, you know, well, we maybe like professionally have an interest in Shakespeare in the sense that it's like cool to be engaged with the history of literature if you're interested in, you know, writing as well. So kind of the language maybe arguably is kind of sufficient reason to be intrigued, or just like the fact that kind of by sheer virtue of its gravity. But, you know, to argue that, or to kind of suggest that people outside of that world ought to read Shakespeare, to suggest that it should be read on the HSC curriculum for interest, or like in high school, you would want to argue that the text has some kind of greater importance, that it like says something maybe, or it has some kind of essentially moral salience. So my kind of final question would be something like, what do you think the moral salience of the ending to Lear is?
Oh, well, I don't know if I would say that there is one to the ending, but the simple thing is also just getting over the hurdle of the difficulty of the language, and that needing to like just for it to still be worth it. I consistently have this experience of reading Shakespeare that I'm just like, well, this is just the best thing I've ever read. Like, this is just like discovering Breaking Bad, or like discovering the great new show. For me, the argument of if it's worth it for people who are not interested in literature, regardless of the clout that you get from being able to say you've read Shakespeare, there are just so many great stories waiting for you to read. So I still think that, it's fundamentally worth it. And for Lear, I just like keep defaulting to thinking the characters are intrinsically interesting, because I think people are intrinsically interesting. So if you just want to read well-written characters, or you want to experience fleshed out people, then Shakespeare is always going to be worth the hurdle of learning the language to understand it. But I don't know if the ending in particular, like actually the story of Lear, is as important as the people who are in it for me. But what about you?
I think maybe like, I certainly think if one has that set of interests, definitely. Maybe what I would pick up on there, and I'll just completely avoid that question, is this idea of blindness. And maybe there's a sense in which like Shakespeare kind of blinds us to the significance of the ending by kind of like, you know, what we don't see in the aftermath, what we don't see about the motivations of Goneril and Regan, like there's still a lot of like fog of war, so to speak, in the text. And I think you're kind of describing the interesting thing about the characters being like how fleshed out they are. And I would agree, but I think the really interesting and unique feature of Shakespeare, which is intrinsically linked to the form being a play, is in one sense the language is very ornamented and detailed, but in another sense there's so much you don't see because there's no prose really in between the dialogue, which gives you a lot of ability to project onto the characters and to imagine them as well. So they're kind of like fleshed out like here, and then you just construct the other side all on your own. And I feel like that's something we've kind of noticed at various points. It's like, who wins the battle? Why do they win the battle? Like, why do these two characters die? Like, what is the significance of the ending? Is all stuff that the text gives you just enough crumbs to make you like desperate to want to try and figure out the answer, but not enough to say with any certainty what it is.
Can you think of any examples where characters are too fleshed out to the point where actually, because I almost feel like the medium of reading like makes it necessary that there is this kind of projecting onto the person and fleshing them out with whatever way you're imagining it in your mind, or how you like construct the image of the words. But do you think that there are characters who are almost like too fleshed out
in literature?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Well, thank you, Shakespeare, for not doing that.
So let's say, I don't know, I'm reading The Stand by Stephen King at the moment. Now, I'm a huge Stephen King guy. Love his work. He's great.
Yeah.
Certainly willing to spill words on the page. And I'm just happy to live with that baggage.
Yeah.
In the same way, maybe you're kind of happy to live with Shakespeare's ludicrousness or silliness or like whatever, like kind of overly ornamented prose or blah, blah, blah. Stephen King, I'm happy to make the trade-off that there's sometimes he just has a little bit of verbal, a little bit too much exiting.
Yeah, a bit of logorrhea.
Yeah. I could have done with writing with a pen every so often. Okay, now, often the introductions to his novels, I would say, are the parts which grip you the most. And sometimes, this isn't true of all of his books, but maybe in particular the books that don't work as well, they kind of trail off in the latter 2/3. And part of that is I think at the start you're getting to know the characters, and then that's really exciting the way he like introduces you to them. And then as it goes on, you kind of like, maybe like, you kind of almost know the characters too well, and it feels like a bit paint by numbers and almost like plot focused. Actually, David Foster Wallace had a nice description of his writing as like a bit televisual. So it kind of like, sometimes you feel like you're just like moving through, I don't know, time and space. Like, I don't know. Moving through time and space. Horrible. Yeah. One of my least favourite activities.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah.
Give me moving through space without time and space. Okay. But now are the characters too fleshed out with that extra information? You can imagine a version of the text where you're receiving more information about the characters, and it is still interesting because it is like distinct information revealing to you new aspects of their consciousness or the human experience. And that would be fantastic. But that would be like also a kind of completely different book, that would require a completely different author to write it. And maybe, this is totally philosophically unsound, but I feel like it somehow makes more sense to look at a text and suggest like, actually, if this had just been like reduced a little bit, you would have a skeleton. Maybe what I would say is, it's about where the flesh comes from. When the author's putting it all there stuff, you kind of want to add your own nutrients.
Yeah.
You want to do some watering of the characters internally, whatever that means. Mulch them. Yeah. Play some music and watch them grow inside your own head. So I think it's maybe more like there's a level of information an author can give you about a character which detracts from your own ability. It almost detracts from, it makes them static. That's what I'd say. When there's too much information about them on the page, they become static because it interferes with your own ability to add and alter the shape of them.
Yeah. Do you have any final remarks? Any extra things? I feel like we've said 3 final remarks. By this point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
all different endings. My final remark is thanks so much for doing another conversation about literature with you.
Yeah, no.
It's been grand.
I should be thanking you. You've carried hard in this episode, and I'm happy to admit that. You've done good, kid. But yeah, thank you for reading Lear with me, and for still being here now that I'm back in the motherland. Do we want to talk about other things that we plan on doing together, or do we want to leave it as a surprise?
I think total surprise.
Yeah.
Man. Let's leave it up to the audience's imagination.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you all. If you're here,
that's such a funny. I think you should say that to everyone.
Yeah.
You read. Thank you for still being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for not spontaneously casting.
The YouTube statistics, it's 50% of people are gone after 45 seconds.
Really?
Yeah. And that's average over
what happens
YouTube.
to them?
I think they just watch the ad and then they're like, I'm done.
Oh, but they're still alive.
Yeah, there's just confirmed deaths in the area. The real tragedy is that all of my viewers died before they got to this part of the video.
Tragedy or farce?
Yeah. I think we should wrap it up there. Otherwise, we'll continue spiraling on tangents. We need to read Tristram Shandy together. You need to read it. I want to reread it. The Book of Tangents. But thank you all for enjoying this selling of Shakespeare, and that I feel substantially less like a dolt and an arse now that I've spent time in Shakespeare, and I'm sure Melville did as well. Do you feel less dolt-like or arsely?
I feel like I'm just as dolt and arse-like, but in a different way.
Yeah. We've gotten onto higher arses.
Yeah, that's right.
Meta dolt. All right. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next video, and